Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 530 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Riesinger.
And I'm Janelle Slade. A violent assault on a 13-year-old and his attacker walking free leaves people outraged and demanding answers.
The 39-year-old Superior, Montana man accused of slamming the boy to the ground for not removing his hat during the national anthem walks out of court.
Now, despite the suspect's past criminal record and the state requesting a $100,000 bond, a judge instead released Kurt Brockway with no bail.
The 39-year-old Brockway appeared in Mineral County Court Monday after he was cited for the assault that fractured the teenager's skull. MTN's Kent Lutzen spent today in Mineral County looking for answers.
Many of you had questions about the reasoning behind Brockway's release. We came down to Mineral County to ask Judge Dale Magone and County Attorney Ellen Donahue about this. The word we got, they were too busy. I called and I emailed and I waited outside the courthouse. When I finally spoke to Judge Magone, he admitted to avoiding me and said he couldn't comment on this case. However, I was able to get court documents that give us more insight into Brockway's past. According to these court documents, Brockway was released on his own recognizance on Monday, but is subject to a list of conditions. A few of those include he is required to affix a GPS to his body. He shall have no contact with the victim and his family along with witnesses, and Brockway can only leave his parents' home for work, doctor appointments, and court appearances. This most recent incident, it comes just 6 months after Brockway was released from supervision from a 2010 case where he was found guilty of assault with a weapon. According to a 2010 affidavit, Brockway randomly pulled a gun on a family of 3. According to those victims, Brockway stated he was going to kill them. Brockway was, however, persuaded by a friend to put down his gun and leave the scene. Brockway was later sentenced to the Department of Corrections for a term of 10 years for this incident. All of that was suspended, but he was on probation until this February. According to court documents, Brockway has a traumatic brain injury, but seems to manage rather well. He completed neurological, psychological therapy, and was prescribed medication. The Montana Department of Corrections Adult Probation and Parole determined Brockway to be low risk and successfully served 9 months under supervision. After 900 hours of community service and serving 7 years of probation, Brockway was discharged from his supervision on February 7th of 2019, just 6 months ago. Now, Brockway, he's back in court. He's facing charges for assaulting a minor. Brockway's arraignment has been set for August 14th at 10 a.m. In Superior, Kent Lutzen, MTN News.
Well, today the boy's mother said he's still healing but having trouble sleeping. She also says that her son is traumatized by that incident.
Well, the State Public Service Commission has lost yet another court decision accusing the commission of improperly standing in the way of renewable power projects.
And it means Northwestern Energy will have to pay up. State law requires utilities to buy a certain amount of power from small local renewable energy projects like wind or solar. But the PSC has been allowing Northwestern Energy to waive that requirement for years. In a ruling late last week, State District Judge Jim Manley of Polson said the PSC's latest decision letting Northwestern off the hook was arbitrary and erroneous. The group
challenging the PSC decision, the Montana Environmental Information Center, says the court ruling means Northwestern Energy must pay $2.5 million in penalties. Now, earlier this year, the same judge ruled against the PSC on 2 cases involving solar energy projects. The earlier rulings are on appeal to the Montana Supreme Court.
Well, the judge's ruling this week could help development of renewable energy projects. Q2's David Jay standing by with more on that. David?
Well, Russ, Jeanelle, the Montana Environmental Information Center says the ruling will help current and new renewable projects. The ruling will make sure projects are treated fairly, according to Brian Fady of the MEIC. He also says Northwestern has required projects be built in 18 months for a 24-month process, and now companies will get more time. Northwestern has 35 megawatts of a required 65 megawatts from renewables, and the Meadowlark project, a solar project north of Billings, has already gone through a process.
It really has a feeling that, the company just doesn't like renewable energy projects. The Meadowlark project should see fairer treatment going forward and hopefully renewed motivation from both Northwestern and the Public Service Commission to just follow the law and let that project have a fair chance.
A response from the Montana Public Service Commission states that it is disappointed in the court's decision, and the commissioner's decision indicates that Northwestern Energy met requirements. Meanwhile, PSC lawyers are reviewing the judge's ruling. Jeanelle, Russ?
All right, thank you, David.
Well, heads up for those of you looking to get rid of some extra yard waste this weekend.
Yellowstone County enacting an open burn ban starting this Friday, August 9th, due to dry conditions. There is no set end date.
Yellowstone County Disaster and Emergency Services says weather conditions will dictate when and if that burn ban will be allowed again.
A Montana ranch for kids fighting to get his license renewed following allegations of child abuse and neglect. MTN's Marin Sue spoke with the Department of Public Health and Human Services and the director of the Ranch for Kids in Rexford to find out what's next.
It was here John Ebelt with Department of Public Health and Human Services explains on July 23rd, DPHHS suspended Ranch for Kids' license to operate over allegations including students being hit, kicked, body slammed, and spit on by staff and continuing psychological abuse. Now Ebelt says Ranch for Kids is fighting back.
To receive a fair hearing on the action taken on the license, we needed to receive a written request for a hearing within 10 days, and that's happened now.
When MTN News last spoke with Ranch for Kids director William Sutley, he said he looked forward to having his license renewed.
This will be a process where there will be hearings and that sort of thing, that evidence should be able to be presented on both sides, and I want that process to unfold. It's going to probably take weeks, months, and I don't know how long that is going to be. Hopefully it can happen as quickly as possible.
Sutley explains Ranch for Kids offers structure and discipline for children suffering with reactive attachment disorder and fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. He says children with these disorders create a volatile home life. Sutley hopes to have the facility reopened soon to continue their mission, helping families cope with challenging children.
That's my first priority, is to support these parents in need. That's our vision. We don't exist for any other reason other than to help these families.
While no court date is set, Ebelt says almost all the children removed are now reunited with their parents. In the near future, Ebelt says the state health department plans to change licensing rules for facilities similar to Ranch for Kids.
It's the rules that would impact ones that are currently licensed or ones that apply for a license in the future.
Ebelt says this rule-changing process will take time and would need to be presented to the Secretary of State and the public. In Kalispell, Marin Sue, MTN News.
Well, not only does a new study released today show Montana has the highest suicide rate in America, it also finds that rate has jumped more than 60% in the last 20 years. Now take a look at some of the other findings. The research, based on data from the U.S. Census Bureau and Centers for Disease Control, shows Montana also has the highest female suicide rate at 12.1 completed suicides per 100,000 people. Native Americans have the highest suicide rate of any race at 22 per 100,000, and firearms are the most used method for both men at 56% and women at 31%. Another key finding in the study shows suicide rates are higher for people not married and those living in places with lower population density. Now, there are ways to help fight this epidemic across Montana. Q2 is now teaming up with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention for this year's Out of the Darkness Community Walk. The Yellowstone Valley Walk to Fight Suicide is Sunday, September 15th. We'll be telling you more about the issue and the efforts to prevent suicide over the next month. You can register, learn more, or donate to our local committed team of volunteers at this story at KTVQ.com.
There's more news from across our state on the MTN 9 o'clock news. Tonight, truck drivers continue to run red lights at the Jackrabbit intersection in Bozeman because of its 70-mile-per-hour speed limit. We're going to hear from officials about what's being done to try and fix that problem at 9 o'clock on the CW.
But first, on tonight's 5:30 news, it's almost time to kick off another year of Montana Fair. We'll take a look at what's in store.
And in sports, moving day at your senior state am. Scott will show us who your lone leader is with one round left.
And coming up in weather, looks like most of the showers in the western mountains continue to nosedive towards Cody instead of Billings, so we're looking at kind of a dry night tonight. We'll have more coming up in a few more minutes.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green. This is the 5:30 news on Q2, Montana's news leader.